Welcome to Bigfoot Society. If you have Bigfoot activity to report from the same areas discussed in this episode, please reach out to me directly after this episode. And if you'd like to be on the podcast to discuss a personal Bigfoot encounter, please reach out to me directly at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. Do you wish there was more Bigfoot Society to listen to every week? Well, there is now. If you become a supporting member over at Patreon, you get a special members-only episode every single week on Wednesdays, and sometimes even more episodes. Head on over to patreon.com/the Bigfoot Society. And now let's get on with the show. All right, Bigfoot Society, I've got the privilege of talking to James Szubski today from Margie's Outdoor Store out there in the Columbia River Gorge. It's a pleasure to have you on the show today. James, how's it going?
It's going great, and thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. You're an individual I've wanted to talk to for a while. I've heard you on a few other shows, and you have such a cool story up there. I love how you're really going after it. And I mean, the things that you are recording, the witness accounts out there, is just simply incredible. Let me actually share a little bit about yourself first. You're so nice to provide some info, and I want to make sure that I provide that. But you're an infantry veteran, wildland firefighter, and nationally certified search and rescue EMT. And at Margie's, you have a very interesting program where it's pretty much a paranormal reporting program at this outdoor adventure store in the Columbia River Gorge, and you've logged over well more than 400 eyewitness accounts of different types of phenomena in the area, which I think is just fascinating. James, I do have to ask you, is this something where you've always been into the weird and the Bigfoot, or was it a thing where, you got the store first and then you started to get into things once you had that?
Well, I grew up in the 70s and 80s, so that's dating me there. And like the Leonard Nimoy show In Search Of was like huge for all the kids in my neighborhood. And our number one was Bigfoot. Like, we talked about him constantly. And, I lived in Ohio, and we knew that Sasquatch was mostly in the Pacific Northwest, especially back in the 70s. And the best geographic minds of our neighborhood gang was pretty sure that for Sasquatch, Ohio was just a 2 or 3 day easy walk for him, and that he would definitely be in the woods around our house without any problem. So it's kind of been a lifelong interest from that regard. But I came out to Washington State back in 1988 as a Cold War soldier stationed at Fort Lewis. And, it was sort of like, coming to the place where Sasquatch is. And we talked about it a lot as soldiers too, because we used to have to do these land navigation courses out here. And, you have to do it in the day and you have to do it at night. You can't carry a flashlight, and you're in some of the deepest, thickest Pacific Northwest forests you can imagine, and having to go on distances and directions and find, basically these coffee cans pinned to trees on, several miles worth of course. And, I was 19 years old, convinced that I was walking through the center of a Sasquatch hive as I was doing these tests. And so it's always been a part of my life. But it was about 4 years ago, my mother-in-law, Margie, owned a couple of stores in the Columbia River Gorge, and she passed away. And my wife and I were living up in Seattle at the time. And we decided that we wanted to carry on the family businesses. And so we moved down here. Well, I moved down here first for a year until we got the kids squared away at school. And the businesses needed some rejuvenating. And so we renamed one of the stores Margie's Outdoor Store. And kind of on a whim, I put a Sasquatch in the logo, like there's a Bigfoot in one of the O's. And it wasn't long before people started coming in, a lot of locals, and they were whispering about some of the unusual and remarkable encounters they were having in the wilderness areas of the Columbia River Gorge. And I found it fascinating. So I'll paint a picture for your listeners of what the Columbia River Gorge is like. So the Columbia River forms the border between southern Washington state and northern Oregon state. And the Columbia is the largest river in North and South America that flows into the Pacific Ocean. And where the gorge is, it actually flows through the Cascade Mountains. And so in the gorge, in the 80s, it was designated the nation's first national scenic area because it is so jaw-droppingly beautiful out here. And you can go, the river is just about at sea level, but you can instantly, in less than half a mile, rocket up to 3,000 feet. And there are these stunning cliffs, and we've got over 90 named waterfalls, more waterfalls than anywhere else in the United States concentrated. Some of those are over 600 feet tall. And the place is riddled with caves. There are over 500 caves, mostly volcanic lava tubes out here. And the gorge is like sort of right at the center of the Cascade Mountains. So the western half of the mountains is like this classic brooding and mysterious Pacific Northwest rainforest with, mist and deep fir and pine trees, cliffs and rivers. And then when you get to the eastern half, you get into the rain shadow. And there is like this sort of austere and almost spiritual desert environment. And you've got, like classic, mesas, flat top buttes, and this really rugged, rocky, cliffy landscape. And then all of that, of course, is surrounded by these Cascade Mountains. And within 35 miles of my store, there are two glacier-clad stratovolcanoes, Mount Adams and Mount Hood, and they're both 10,000. They're over 10,000 feet. And then there's Mount St. Helens, which erupted in 1980. It was the most destructive volcanic event in United States history, and that's also just like 40 miles from my store. And so it's sort of like, if you've ever played video games, like one of the coolest open world maps you could possibly imagine. And you had mentioned that I've got all this outdoor experience, and so for me, coming down here was like I'd won the lottery. Like it was just utter paradise. And to give you just a little bit of sense of like where we are located geographically, the city of Portland, like if you were to come here, you would fly into Portland, and then you'd drive about 60 miles east to the town of Bingen, which is right across the river from the town of Hood River. There's a bridge, and that's where my store is located. So like we are kind of dead center in the middle of the gorge, like right where the rainforests turn into desert. And so that's the setting that we're talking about. And it is one of the true rugged wilderness, like the true, expedition-worthy wilderness areas left in America, left in the world, in fact. People don't really have a sense of just how vast these wilderness regions are. But the Cascade Mountains, they're combined, like if you took the 10 smallest states in the U.S. and glommed them all together, they still wouldn't be as big as the Cascade Mountains, which range from southern British Columbia in Canada all the way through Washington, Oregon, and Northern California. And it's also the place where there have been tons and tons of Sasquatch sightings throughout the years. In fact, on the Washington side, there are two counties. There's Skamania County and Klickitat County. My stores are in Klickitat County. My home is in Skamania County. And Skamania County was the first governmental body in the world to create Sasquatch protection legislation. All the way back in 1968, they passed laws that made the county a Sasquatch sanctuary. And if you shoot and kill a Sasquatch here in Skamania County, and the coroner determines that it is a humanoid, you'll be charged with manslaughter. And so this is a place where it's taken pretty seriously. What sort of stunned my wife and I when we first got down here was that it seemed like everyone we met either knew someone who had a Sasquatch experience or had had one themselves. And we're talking about people whose families have lived here for generations. And for them, Sasquatch this is like no question. It's just a part of the natural world that's out here. Once these people started coming in and talking about all of these just remarkable experiences. And, we were hearing about Sasquatch stories. We were hearing UFO stories. We're hearing, ghost stories. We were hearing stories. And this one really captured my imagination. We have over 130 reports of this enormous Black Panther creature. Locally, it's called the Klickitat Ape Cat. And so all of the reports of this creature say that it is a very muscular cat. So cat body form, long black tail, and it always has black fur. And we know that's not a cougar because science does not recognize black cougars as a thing. And about half of the reports that we have received say the creature is enormous in size. By that, I mean 4 to 5 feet tall at the shoulder, anywhere between 700 and 1,300 pounds. And so that's like half of the reports. And then there's a tiny fraction of the reports, probably less than 10%, that say the creature has a face that looks like a monkey. And when they talk about that, they usually say that they always talk about it has a shortened snout, so it doesn't have quite as long of a nose as you'd expect to see in a cat. Oftentimes, they talk about intelligent ape-like eyes, sort of a primate feel to its face. Sometimes it's reported without fur on its face, just like a black leathery skin. And so, like I said, we've had all of these reports, and I'll talk more about that creature in a minute. But when we started it, I gave very specific instructions to the staff. I said, we are going to take everyone who comes in here seriously. We are going to believe the witness, no matter how outlandish it sounds to us and our personal experience. We're going to treat this person with dignity and respect, and we're going to ask intelligent follow-up questions, and we'll see what happens. I know from research and a bunch of other things that when you create a safe place for people, you're more likely to hear things, right, and to hear the stories and the accounts. And at first, the community was looking at me, with arms crossed and a skeptical raised eyebrow. But over time, we have proven that we treat people with respect, that we're not going to think that you're crazy, that we're going to protect your information if you ask us to. We're not going to, blab about who told us what. And eventually, we earn the community's trust. And, there are many times now, after, like I said, close to over 400 reports, where I am the second person that someone has told about, their Sasquatch experience or whatever, the UFO experience or whatever it is. Oftentimes, the first person they told was either like a friend or a relative, and that person told them they were crazy or they were on drugs or whatever. And so they just decided that they weren't going to take that social risk ever again. And because we created this place, a safe place for ordinary people to talk about extraordinary experiences, they have entrusted us with, this remarkable, oftentimes it's 20 seconds to 3 minutes of their lives that they have never forgotten. And I didn't know it when we started, but that has turned out to be one of the hidden gems of this whole experience. I mean, we've made these connections on a very human level with people. The relief that people feel when they're believed is amazing. The camaraderie and the rapport that you feel with somebody, especially when I can relate to them other stories that I've heard that are similar to theirs, and they have a sense that they're not alone. Like, that has been beyond rewarding. And in many ways, I have come to feel like these people need a champion, someone who will stand up for them, someone who will talk intelligently about these experiences, take the brunt of whatever criticisms or snickers are out there, and bring these things to light and validate their experiences. And so for me, it's really become sort of a mission in life. It's really cool to have a physical location where people could come. And a lot of the reports that we get, people just come in and they'll talk to us. We do have an online reporting system, and a lot of times we'll get reports that way as well. I try to follow up on all the ones that come in online, especially if they're located in the gorge. But it's just been, like I said, a remarkable and really deeply satisfying and enjoyable experience for me. And, we knew, I'm not a fool. Like, I knew people would come in and, tell tall tales, or, there'd be people who have legitimate mental health issues that they're working through. And I figured, I'm not pretending to be a scientist here. I'm just going to be a human being, a curious and compassionate human being, and see where it leads us. And I have been really surprised at, it's a tiny, vanishing a number of people who've come in clearly, joking around, like they sign their reports, see more butts or something like that. But there's not many people that come in and do that. The majority of people are people who have had some kind of legitimate experience that they don't have context for. And we help try to provide that. But now it's gotten to the point, so, it's evolved. And I'm pretty well known in the gorge. I've got an FJ Cruiser 4x4 that I've modified, and it's got, lights and logos and everything on it, and cameras and drones, and it's a paranormal research vehicle. We call it, the license plates are cryptid. And so it's pretty recognizable. And people will stop me at the post office or at the grocery store or at a restaurant and say, "Oh, James, I've been meaning to talk to you. I've got this really incredible story to tell you." And so that's been, like I said, it's been fun to watch the community's opinion change, and for them to really get behind it and see it as a value. I think one of the most, rewarding parts of the experience is the store has earned 13 Best of the Gorge Awards in the past 3 years. And that's because of all the love we get from people recognizing that we're doing something kind of special.
I think that has got to be so rewarding, knowing that you're able to affect or give people a outlet in order for them to feel that they're safe, respectful environment. And it's very similar to what I try to do here. But the cool thing is that you are extremely boots on the ground, and you are the place to go there in that area for people to share. And people are realizing that, they can trust you. But the ape cat, I find that is so fascinating. And it's because now that I think about it, I had an episode a few months ago, and it was a elk hunter up by Astoria, and he had a Bigfoot report he was sharing. But then he came back on in another episode, and he actually had shared a sighting of a strange creature that had a long tail and a very strange face. And the more that I hear about the ape cat creature, it sounds like this could be kind of similar. Now, it's not in the gorge, but it was up by Longview. I don't know. Does this creature seem to have a pretty wide environment range, or does it kind of just stick down to where you guys are?
Well, we've done research on big cats, and these animals can travel 25 miles in a day. The gorge is maybe 100 miles from Astoria, and it's connected to the Columbia River. I mean, the story is where the Columbia River empties into the ocean. And so I absolutely not be at all surprised. I've even heard reports of myself from relatives of mine who live in Hoquiam, which is just north of Astoria, who have seen the cat on their property out there. And so we're pretty sure that these creatures aren't obeying any, lines of geography, and they're apparently excellent swimmers. And so the notion that they could easily cross the river, I mean, we're certain that they have, because we have reports in both Oregon and Washington. But, you had asked me earlier, like, have I had any experiences myself? And my answer was yes. And some of them occurred before we even started the reporting program. And recognizing that was, I think, part of my motivation for taking people seriously with their reports. So, back in 2021, sort of like early days before we had really even kicked off the program, I was standing along the river's edge and taking a picture of a really cool, like pencil thin beam of sunlight coming down through the clouds into the gorge onto the river. And when I looked at the photographs afterwards, there is this incredible blue glowing orb on there. And, I've got a bit of experience with digital photography, and I know what lens flares are and how they occur and things like that. And it was obvious that this was not a lens flare. I can go through all the characteristics, but they're kind of unimportant. The important thing is that, I captured this thing on film. And that was an interesting data point for me. Like, oh, wow, that's kind of unusual. We have, dozens, scores and scores of reports of glowing orbs in the gorge. In fact, it's one of the most common phenomena we hear about. My wife and I have seen them with our naked eyes while driving on Highway 14 out here. And so that was one of those experiences that we've had. And, as I look back over the reports that we've received over the years, oftentimes we have glowing orbs reported in association with Sasquatch sightings. I can't say for sure that they are connected, but they do seem like they're correlated. And we'll get reports of, we were watching these glowing orbs, and they range anywhere in size from softball size to 12 feet in diameter to things that look like they could be a craft of some type. And so we hear stories of people, we saw these white orbs and they were on the ridgeline, and then quickly turned into Sasquatch encounter at their campsite. Other people will hear vocalizations and then see orbs leaving the area where the vocalizations came from. So that was one of those, personal experiences that I've had. The other one was, I was out in an area called Horse Thief Butte. So Horse Thief Butte is like a desert mesa. It's got these, high walls, flat top. And from the road, it looks like a classic monolith, just a solid piece of rock. And it's sandwiched between Highway 14 and the Columbia River. But when you get close to it, it is riddled with a labyrinth of hidden passageways and amphitheaters. There are petroglyphs on the walls. The Native Americans considered it a place of, great spiritual power. And they would go there in ancient times to go on vision quests to find their spirit animals. And, there's evidence that the gorge is one of the oldest inhabited areas in America. Right near this Horse Thief Butte area is considered one of the most important archaeological sites in all of North America. And in fact, people have been living here from 10,000 years before the pyramids were built in Egypt, just to give you a sense of like how steeped and hoary with, history this place is. And I was climbing around up in these cliffs. It's a really cool area. And it was getting close to sunset. From the butte, you can see Mount Hood, shining its pointed peak in the distance. And at the base of the butte, there's like this sort of flat land. It's a scab land. It runs about, 200-300 yards. And then it drops off a cliff. And then there's this lake. It's called Horse Thief Lake. And then on the far side of Horse Thief Lake, there's this wall of petroglyphs. And I was up there, I think it was in June, at getting close to sunset. There's still plenty of light, though. And I was looking down into the lake, and I saw this creature swimming around in the water. And I couldn't figure out what it was. There were ducks on the water. And so I could kind of get an estimate of its size. And it was probably 700, 800 yards away from me at the time. So not a good look at it. Didn't have binoculars with me. And the creature had dark coloration. So it, was, if it had fur, it would have been dark fur. And it seemed to be patrolling the center of the lake. It looked like it was larger than a man, but smaller than a car. So somewhere in that size scale. And I observed it submerge underwater, sometimes for up to 5 minutes, and then come back up and continue patrolling the center of the lake. And I have spent tens of thousands of hours in the wilderness, and I could not figure out what the hell I was looking at. I went through the inventory of the creatures that live out here, and, we've got a lot of black bear. Black bears are good swimmers, but they're typically point-to-point swimmers, and they're not the kind of creature that'll submerge. We've got elk that are that big, but they're not submerging creatures, and they definitely are point-to-point swimmers as well. That's something that'd be patrolling the center of a lake. And, I kind of went through this inventory of things I had no idea what it could be. And again, this was before we had started our reporting program. And then, so I just sort of chalked it up to do not know what that was, but it is unlike any creature I have ever seen in my life. And then later, we were, as these reports of these cats came in, I started doing more research, and I learned that jaguars are excellent swimmers, and they can hold their breath for 15 minutes. They are just really, really strong swimmers. And that, sort of made me start to wonder, was I looking at a cat down there? I honestly don't know. And then there was another experience that I had. So, I live in Skamania County, and I had my FJ Cruiser, and I was working on, I think, some of the spotlights or something like that in the garage one night, and I heard this bellowing noise. And I thought, man, that kind of sounds like a Sasquatch, like, from the reports that I had heard. And there was stick knocking, like that knocking of sticks. And so I called my 11-year-old daughter out into the garage, and I said, listen, do you hear it? And she said, yeah, I do. I said, what do you think it is? She's like, I don't know. And like, we didn't think it was an elk because they have sort of a higher whistle kind of a sound to it. This was a sort of a lower thing, but it was definitely being created by a very large creature, like at least 1,000 pounds. It was not a small noise. And I called my wife out, and she listened to it too. And, and then we listened to elk recordings, and we were certain it wasn't an elk. And I thought, man, we might be listening to a Sasquatch out there. So the next day, I got in the rig, the cryptid, and sort of started driving around looking for the area where the sound was coming from. And it sounded like it was maybe a quarter mile away from my house. So it wasn't that far. And I got out there and was sort of scoping out the area. And then I found a pasture. And in that pasture was a big bull, a big steer, cattle. And then he opened his mouth, and he made that same noise that I had heard the night before. And I love this story because it's easy to get Squatch fever and think that, everything that happens weird out here in the gorge is some kind of, clearly, definitely seeing Squatch. But here's one where we went out and we verified. It's the purpose of our investigations is to find the ones that are real and make sure that if there's something that's got a rational explanation, that, we're not glomming things together that don't belong in unusual phenomenon. And so that was one of those kind of deals where I was pretty sure I was listening to a Sasquatch. I still don't know where the stick knocking came from. Maybe that was, something different. But the noise that the whole family heard turned out to actually be a cow and not a Sasquatch at all.
I think that's a great lesson. And yes, you are correct. As a lot of listeners know, it is very easy to get, Sasquatch fever or Bigfoot on the brain. And there's many different ways to say it, but it is so important to kind of, maybe sometimes take a little bit of a step back and be aware of, what's going on in the area. But I mean, sometimes, yeah, you take a step back, but you still can't, logically explain away what's going on, but it's important to do that. These reports that you're getting at Margie's, have you found that are most of the Bigfoot reports more peaceful or passive, or are there also some reports in the area of maybe more aggressive Sasquatch?
So we have had no hostile encounters reported at the store. And that goes for Sasquatch and for the ape cat as well. With the ape cat, there was one story where a guy thought that the cat was going after his goats, and so he shot at it with a .22. But that was, no human was in danger. And, so the short answer is no, we really don't get a lot of reports of hostile encounters. We get a lot of reports of people being scared crapless. And so, like, that's a real thing. And, the stories that we've heard, there's some where these creatures are 13 feet tall. And we have an 11-foot Sasquatch in the store. It's sort of a piece of insulating foam covered with fur in the silhouette of a Sasquatch. And you stand next to that thing, you're like, geez Louise, that's just gigantic. Until you're actually standing next to an 11-foot tall thing, it is hard to wrap your head around how big it is. But I'm 6'5", and I come up to his butt, and it's just like, man, that is huge. But So there's a ton of stories to talk about in this regard. There are some folks that see them quite a bit, and there's one guy who I've been out to his property a couple of times, and he's brought me hair samples. He has seen pregnant ones. He's heard them giving birth. He's seen blonde ones and red furred ones and brown ones and black ones. We've had reports of white furred ones as well out here in the gorge. One night he said that there were 13 of them that he counted on his property, and they were sort of lining up to cross the road. It's sort of like they would cross one at a time, and there was sort of a leader one. And he lives in an area on the maps. We've had reports in the store that Native Americans have treaties with these creatures for berry picking areas and mushroom gathering areas and salmon harvesting areas. And so it's when you hear this many stories and you live amongst these people, you say either everyone here is a liar, which I don't believe at all, and that's just rude. I mean, like, if you are going to accuse people of lying that you've never met, like, what are you doing? Like, how are you raised? Or they're deluded, and I know that they're not deluded. These are, intelligent people. They're my neighbors. They're my friends, and many of them, like some of them, are businessmen, insurance salesmen, store owners, police officers. And so people are definitely encountering these creatures out there, and they seem to be really good at hiding, really capable. When I was a soldier, we could hide a whole platoon of guys, in an area, 50 feet by 50 feet, and you would walk right on top of us and not even know we were there. And we just worked in the woods. Like, these creatures live there, and their livelihood, their survival depends on being able to blend in with the wilderness. And to anyone who thinks, how could they hide and how could you not see them? They just have no idea, A, how vast it is out here, and B, like, how you can hide in this kind of wilderness. Like, it really is something. Like, you just have to be here to understand how that could work, and it absolutely can work. So, but you asked about, is it benevolent? Are there any of these hostile encounters? And I had a very unusual experience myself, and my ultimate conclusion was it was a benevolent experience. So we have this place up here called the Big Lava Bed. It's called the Big Lava Bed on many maps. A lot of locals call it Broke Leg Barrows. And it is an area approximately the size of the island of Manhattan in New York. So, 3-4 miles across and, 7 to 9 miles long. And basically 8,000 years ago, there was a volcanic vent opened up, and it created this giant lava bed. And the way to imagine it is, like, imagine just a tangled mass of rocks that sort of bulldozed itself and filled an entire mountain valley. And so there are like these micro canyons and jagged rocks. If you have any Tolkien fans out there, it's like Amon Wheel. It's a unpassable labyrinth of razor sharp rocks. These rocks are covered with moss. There's tons of hidden lava tubes in there. So a lava tube is when the lava starts flowing, the surface, the top of the lava, cools and hardens and creates a sort of an insulated tube. And then the rest of the lava runs through there, and then it runs out, and then the hollow tube is left behind. And so we have, like I said, over 500 lava tube caves up here. And sometimes those caves will collapse and form trenches. And so this place is really, really weird. As a soldier and a search and rescue EMT and a firefighter, I have been professionally trained on land navigation since I was a teenager. And, among the skills that I have, land navigation is one of them. I mean, literally in the jobs that I've had, whether it be search and rescue or a soldier, lives depended on me knowing how to navigate and doing it well. And so I was out in this area, and a couple of things about it. There are no trails in there. Local hunters don't like to go in there. We've had dozens of people go missing in that area. Compasses don't work reliably out there. Cell phones absolutely don't work out there. And it's got this sort of weird scrubby forest on it. It's like a hard living for a tree. And so there are some areas that are barren, and it's almost like the surface of the moon with moss. Other areas have got these weird stunted forests in them. And it's just a really mysterious and intriguing place. We have numerous Sasquatch sightings in this area, numerous ape cat sightings in this area, and vocalizations, tree knockings, trees getting knocked over, like lots of stuff, like lots of activity. And the place is so big that like you could have, 5 or 6 Ewok villages of Sasquatches out there and no one would ever know. And occasionally someone would go looking for caves in there and go missing. And, we have search and rescue teams come out and look for them. And there's been some weird stories about, like the U.S. military has showed up on a search and rescue for a random civilian. Now, I have been on scores of search and rescue missions, and the only time the military will put boots on the ground is if it's one of their aircraft that's gone down or one of their people that's missing, or, it's a civilian flight that's gone down. Other than that, you're lucky to get a chopper out of the Coast Guard. But for searches out here, like they'll deploy the nation's most elite pararescue team to go look for people out here. And it's weird because, there are, back in the 1975, the Army Corps of Engineers produced a document called the Washington Environmental Atlas. And it basically went through like all of the natural things that are in Washington state. So it went through the geology, it went through the plant life, it went through the animal life, the archaeological sites and everything. And basically it was a complete description of what the land was, Washington state. And there's a section in it that talks about all the animals. And on page 73, there is an entry for Sasquatch. And it is noted as one of the creatures that lives here in Washington state. And on page 73, there is also a map that shows Bigfoot habitation sites. And this Broke Lake Barrows area is on that map. Mount St. Helens is on that map. And so, it seems pretty clear that the U.S. government is at least aware, or parts of it are aware, that there are creatures living out here like Sasquatch. I mean, the entry is Bigfoot. I mean, there's, no question about it, what you're seeing there in that document. So getting back to the story, though, I was out there and I find this place incredibly intriguing. I've navigated in deserts and swamps and glaciers and forests and you name it. But this place kind of gives me the heebie-jeebies. Like it's the one land navigation challenge that scares me because those rocks are so dangerous. Like if you slip and fall in there, you could really hurt yourself. I mean, like, yeah, it's kind of crazy. And also like all of the things like your compass not working and, it's sometimes hard to get a lock with GPS out there. But I drove up there and I parked my car at the edge of the lava bed in the middle of the forest and walked in about 100 yards and was flying my drone up and down this trench. Let's just say, for the sake of description, it was a north-south trench. And I flew my drone up and down a couple of times, and then it hit a tree branch at the south end of that trench. And I went and picked it up, put the drone away, and walked to the north end of the trench, probably 100 yards. And then, to my recollection, I took a 90-degree turn and then walked another 400 yards west into the lava bed, exploring as I was going, checking things out. And as a professional land navigator, there's a ton of things that you're doing in the background whenever you're in the forest. And you are doing things like, noting landmarks, watching the position of the sun, doing your pace count. There's a whole set of techniques and tricks and things like that where you are always maintaining your location relative to where you started and relative to where you were. And I thought that I was doing all those things. I mean, like I have done 1,000 times before. And I came upon another really interesting trench. And this one was fascinating. And so I started to get the drone out again and I began flying the drone up and down what I thought was a new trench. And then, like waking up from a dream, I realized slowly that I was right back where I had originally crashed the drone. Now, this was 500-600 yards from where I thought I was, where I should have been. I have no memory, none whatsoever, of how I got from where I thought I was to where I ended up. And the only thing that sort of tipped me off was I looked over my shoulder and I could see my car 100 yards away. And it was the most disconcerting, discombobulating feeling I've ever had. I mean, I cannot remember the last time I got turned around or lost in a wilderness setting. Like I said, lives depend on me knowing how to do this. In fact, like, I'm the kind of person you call when someone else gets lost in the woods and you need someone competent and capable to find them and get them out. And to be that turned around and that just flamboozled about how I had arrived where I was and having no recollection of getting there. Like, my memories were seamlessly edited. And at first I was like a little bit creeped out. I was like, what has happened to me? Like, I'm the kind of person, like, when you see a person's face and then you walk away for 15 minutes and you come back and you see it again, like, their face. Like, that's what, like, a wilderness location is like for me, especially one unique like this trench. And then I had I thought I was in a brand new place. That is like just unheard of for me. And as I started contemplating like what had happened, at first I was like, what? Like, just sort of off put by it. Then I was excited that, we've had many people come in and tell us reports of having time loss and spatial displacement and stuff like that. And this experience had actually happened to me. And as I thought about it, I thought, if there was something like a Sasquatch or whatever that didn't want me to go deeper into that lava bed on that day, this was the most benevolent way possible to put me back at start. They put me in a place that was relatively safe, where I could quickly find my vehicle, easily get out of this really rugged and actually pretty dangerous terrain area, and do it in a way that did me no harm and caused me no trouble. And so the overwhelming sense that I had, like, once I got over being completely, bamboozled by being lost in the woods for the first time in decades, was, wow, like, this was the kindest, softest, most benevolent way of just bumping me out of a place that I shouldn't have been on that day at that time. So yeah, those are some of the lived experiences I've had out here, and it's really been amazing.
It's absolutely just fascinating to hear about that area. And I've never specifically heard that about that atlas before. I've seen like the screenshot of the Sasquatch in it, but just I've never really heard about that. It calls out certain spots on the map. Does it call out other places in Washington State too, or does it really just focus on that one area in that atlas?
Yeah, there's I'm remembering now. Like, yeah, you can easily look it up online. You just look up Army Corps of Engineers Washington Environmental Atlas, and it's not hard to find. Like, you download a PDF and, like, however many 100 pages are in there. And on page 73, there's a Sasquatch. It definitely shows it up north. There's an area called Index, which is where Harry and the Hendersons was filmed. We used to do a lot of rock climbing back in the day. And I'm pretty sure there are marks in that area. There are places in Spokane. In fact, in Spokane, there's a Fairchild Air Force Base, and they have a SEER school, which is survival, escape, resistance, and evasion. Mm-hmm. It's like if a pilot gets downed, they train them how to get back to friendly territory. And they issue them a map of Washington State, and on that map, it's got pictures of all the dangerous, all the animals and wildlife. And there's a section on dangerous animals, and they've got, our orcas and our bears and that kind of stuff. And there's a picture of Sasquatch. It's a 2007 map from the SEER School at Fairchild Air Force Base that also shows Sasquatch. So either they're hilarious jokesters, or the U.S. government is aware that these creatures live here in Washington State.
That's the kind of thing that really it makes me wish that people that were in the know in government for that state or Oregon or whatever out there would just start coming forward, and man, we just gotta start getting some answers because, or I mean, I feel we already have the answers, but it would be nice if people from in government would just be like, oh yeah, it's real, just throw it all out there. Why not? We're doing all the UAP stuff. We might as well do the Sasquatch stuff.
Sasquatch.
Yeah, exactly. Why
You
not?
know, the problem, I don't think, is the evidence. Like anyone who's been in the Bigfoot community for any amount of time knows there's genetic evidence, there's tons of photographic and video evidence. So the problem isn't the evidence, it's the audience. And Bigfoot has been around for decades in the public imagination. And on any given day, 70% of the population, the minute they hear the word Bigfoot, thinks that automatically, without even considering anything other than the name, the brand Bigfoot, it's a hoax. Like straight up, there's just no getting around it. And so, because there's been disclosures, there's been all the things that we would have hoped for, and like, Bigfoot's got a branding problem, and that's sort of the way that it's just the weight of his history. And to be sure, there are people who have created hoaxes, and try to do fakes and stuff like that. And I had mentioned earlier that one of my passions is sort of being a champion for witnesses, for true witnesses, right? And a part of that is debunking, what I would call the enthusiastically mistaken. Like that night that I found that we heard the cow, I was enthusiastically mistaken that I was hearing a Sasquatch, right? We got a really cool photograph in a report. It was from a trail cam, and it looked for all the world like a black cat leaping. And I thought, geez, this is like, we got it right here. Look at this thing. But the problem was that the photo from a second before didn't have it in there, and the photo from a second afterwards didn't have it in there. And I was like, what? How could this be? And it was a silhouette, so you couldn't get a lot of detail. So I took it back to the store and did some image analysis on it and, worked with some contrast and filters. And it turned out that, nope, actually it was a crow, and its wings were just in a very unusual configuration at a unique angle. And it wasn't a cat leaping at all. It was just, again, enthusiastically mistaken. So the point is that it's the problem with the audience, like not the evidence. And if you're going to be a champion for the true witnesses, the ordinary people who've seen extraordinary things, then I've been asking myself, like, what can I do? We've got easily one of the most active paranormal hotspots in North America here in the Gorge. There's lots of interesting theories about why that might be, but like this is a really interesting testing or proving grounds, right? So this spring, we're going to be offering a $10,000 reward for the most compelling evidence of strange phenomenon in the gorge. Oof. And, we'll take evidence on everything from Bigfoot to this ape cat to the UFOs people are seeing here. And there's a team of volunteers here in the gorge. We're going to investigate the evidence. And at the end of the summer, we're going to announce who the $10,000 winner is. And there's a couple of reasons why I'm doing this. One of the big ones is that we're crowdsourcing evidence gathering, right? So there are 2.5 million people that live in the Portland area, metro area, and they come to the gorge to recreate and hike and do all that kind of stuff. And of course, there's the 80,000 people who live here already. And a lot of these folks see these creatures on the regular. And there's enough, social stigma and hurdles to bring in evidence and bring it forward, right? And so $10,000, I hope, is motivating enough to put your neck out a little bit and say, yes, I've got something worth looking at here, right? And the investigation team is, we're going to be alert for hoaxes, but we are trying to confirm that their evidence is real. Like, that's our goal is, okay, you've given us a good foothold. Now we're going to go and figure out all of the conditions around it. And what's really cool is because all of these investigators live here in the gorge, like we can respond within hours to a report. Like if someone says, yeah, I just saw him up on, the Syncline Road, like we can hop in my cryptid 4x4 and zip on out there and look for prints and look for hair and do all the other kind of things. And, ensure that, take our own video of it. There are many folks who live out here who have reoccurring experiences, like the cats show up regularly in their orchard and they have a name for it, and it's kittens. There are folks that have, see Sasquatch on their property all the time. And so, they can provide us with some initial footage, and then, we can go up there and do a stakeout and try to capture it with our own cameras. And one of the things that I've been wanting to bring to the Bigfoot community, that your audience specifically, is what would be the ideal footage? Like, if you could give someone instructions on how to take the best photographic video evidence of something, that another researcher could follow up on your work and verify what you've done, like, what instructions would you give that person? Off the top of my head, I would say things like, ensure that your geolocation settings are on your camera. Another thing that I would say is, narrate your experience as you're having it. Tell us the time, the day, the weather, what it is that you're filming, why you're filming it. Is there anyone else there with you? If you have a buddy, film it from 2 different angles. I would say things like, kick an X in the ground where you're filming from, so that we can put our camera there and then go down range and then be able to approximate the height, because we know where your camera was, and then we can go down range and estimate, figure out where he was. I would say, before you're finished filming, turn your camera 360 degrees around so we can see the entire environment where you're at, and more accurately locate your location. I'm sure that your audience has more ideas on, what kinds of things you could do to create that best evidence, the kind of evidence that other researchers could verify your footage with. And I don't know, do you have any thoughts on what, like, you've probably seen tons of different videos and different things, and like, man, I wish that they had, steadied their camera or leaned up against a tree, or, whatever it is.
So it's something I've been working over the last year, because it's a thing where as AI progresses, the video side of things is beginning to get better and better. I've seen, thankfully, most of the Bigfoot stuff in the video form, you can pick out right away that it's fake. I've seen one or two where I'm like, ooh, that's a little bit too close for comfort, where we're starting to get there. But I think, if I was trying to do something like this, it would be very, very important that I would see the original media that it was on, whether it be like old school VHS-C tape, or even, maybe it's someone's going to bring in the next old school Patterson Gimlin, and it's like on an old reel, reel whatever. But I think it's going to be very, very important for that. And also, I mean, if you do end up getting like digital media, to be able to see like the metadata on it, and there are, especially when you're throwing 10K into the mix, it's going to get very, very interesting. I think I can't wait to see the type of stuff that you get. But it's, it's also like, if you're getting a video from a person where, they were just out there in the gorge and like they just randomly, it's probably going to be a pretty, it's not going to have all the bells and whistles. Like, we have our ideas, like, make sure you get the whole thing of the surroundings, and it's probably going to be pretty rough. Like those, if you see a bald eagle, or there's this, I drove by a bald eagle once, and it happened so quick. I just didn't have the time to even get out my phone to take a picture. It's like, this stuff happens in seconds. But in the best case scenario, if a person could get all that stuff that you said, oh man, that would be just amazing. The things that you could use to replicate by going
Yeah.
to the area. And if you had the GPS coordinates and all that good stuff, I mean, I'm excited to hear in the future, and not too far off. I mean, this is going to all happen pretty quick. I mean, you should be able to get some really cool stuff from this experiment. It's really an experiment, you know. So,
Yeah. You know, that AI thing has got me concerned as well. Like,
yeah.
you know, and obviously you could recommend people get Polaroids, and in our investigation bag, we have Polaroid cameras so that, you know, if we're taking pictures, we at least have a physical medium, much harder to futz with than a digital one, right? So it makes it more compelling. But one of the team members happens to be a psychic medium who finds dead people for a living.
Wow.
And she, you know, it's a tricky thing because to the outside observer, you're trying to find something that doesn't exist with, you know, something that doesn't exist. Like, if you don't believe in Sasquatch, you probably don't believe in psychic mediums. But Jamie is remarkable. She has been basically talking to dead people since she was 8 years old, and she has clients on 5 continents. She's helped law enforcement across the country, and the sheriff out here, the sheriff of Skamania County, is willing to help us with our project. And so, you know, we'll be working with her to verify some of the things that we're going with as well. But it is, like you said, with this AI, it becomes a really challenging. It becomes harder and harder to believe anything you see on video. And so, you know, I think that, you know, this cat, you know, we have video of the cat, and I've seen video of the cat. We have senior law enforcement people who've reported that they've seen the cat to me. You know, we've got decades of reports, and I'm pretty sure, like, and, you know, people say they see it on their property all the time. And, you know, that's one where I'm pretty sure that we'll be able to demonstrate that there's a population of large-backed cats currently not recognized by science living here in the gorge by the end of the summer. And I feel like we might have a better bet of proving that cryptid than Bigfoot, because Bigfoot, like I said, he's got decades of branding and, you know, issues. People don't know if they believe in big black cats or not. And if we can, you know, get them exposed to this idea, and then a few months later demonstrate that these creatures are actually living out here, we will then show that, yes, it is possible for a large mammal to live in the United States undetected or unrecognized by science, and then bring that to the fore. And I think that can bulldoze a pathway that makes Bigfoot so much more believable. It makes the mountains of evidence that the creature is real, gives people a reason to believe that, or take another look at it. You know, and again, for me, it all goes down to, I'm honestly more interested in validating the witnesses than necessarily proving that this stuff exists. Like, that's where my motivation is really centered on this whole project. I'm so excited. Like, you know, we have to wait for the snow to melt out here before we announce the workers, but we don't want them getting hurt. We had 2 Bigfoot searchers die on Christmas because they died of exposure because they weren't properly prepared. So that's one of the reasons why I'm working with the sheriff, is we don't want anyone getting hurt out here with this project. And so her and I are going to create some safety videos and things like that. But I'm super excited. And I really hope that, you know, some of the competent people who have this as a passion in their life come out to the gorge. And, you know, those are the people that are going to know how to create good footage and help us capture some, hopefully, stuff that will give the world another reason to consider this stuff.
Is it a thing where there's going to be updates as about the project, like on the Margie's website, or where will that happen?
Yeah. So yeah, Margie's outdoor store. As soon as we're ready to start making announcements and given all the conditions and everything like that, we'll definitely be on margiesoutdoorstore.com, Margie's Outdoor Store on Facebook, on Instagram, and on YouTube. But we're going to film all of our investigations and put them up on a YouTube channel called Gorge Mysteries. So not now, but soon there'll be a Gorge Mysteries website and Facebook page and YouTube channel. And so the idea is that we will film the investigations, and as quickly as we can, we'll get them out. And one of our visions is we would love the community to help us with the investigations. We think of it as an online posse. There's some stuff that, we can do as boots on the ground, but like when we get UFO sightings or orb sightings, like we would love to have the online community scrub the FAA records and the, astronomical event records and see if, we can eliminate any of those kind of things. But I love the idea of this being not my project, but the community's project, and finding ways for more and more people to get engaged. And I mean, at the end of the day, I am living the dream. Like, I own successful stores here in the Gorge. Hundreds of people have come to me and told me about these extraordinary experiences. I've got this really cool 4x4 that, me and my friends dash off into the woods when we get these reports, and we investigate like these amazing semi-mythical phenomena that's out here. And it's such a joyful, satisfying way to live. And I want this for as many people as possible, to live this kind of adventure and to have these. It's almost like we're citizen scientists, and there's this sense of like actual wonder in the world for us. We live in a place where the wonders are real, and the joy and satisfaction of that. And it comes from, opening a space in your mind where you say, I don't know if these facts are real, but it's possible. And that's when the dull, gray 9-to-5 world opens up into full color, and the experiences that you get to have are utterly remarkable. And, you feel so much more alive when you haven't predetermined that what you're looking for isn't real. So
I love it. Oh my goodness. It's very, very exciting just to think. I've been thinking that 2025, there's some really cool stuff that's going to come out in this year. And I mean, I didn't know anything about all this that you just shared. And I think it's going to be absolutely fantastic to see this all take place. And it's exciting, James. And thank you for sharing it on my show tonight.
If any of your audience member want to send me a note, you can send it to staff at margiestores.com. So staff at margiestores.com. And I think that there's a link on our website to an email address. It might be the same one. But like, if you want to get a hold of me and you've got some thoughts or ideas you want to share about what we're doing, we are asking for input, because like I'm a newcomer to this Bigfoot thing. There are people who've been doing this their whole lives. And, the state of Washington tourism, like I'm trying to introduce them to this idea of paranormal tourism. I told them there's a study from Scotland that says Nessie drives $54 million a year in incremental revenue to local businesses. And Nessie's a huge part of their international marketing campaign. And I'm not trying to commercialize Sasquatch or any of these things. What I'm trying to do is give the powers that be an economic interest in promoting them, in not shuffling it off to the side and saying this isn't real, this is BS, but to say, hey, you know what? If Washington State embraces paranormal tourism, and we have elected officials who are endorsing some of these things that we're finding, or we're giving them reasons to care and not just put us at the kid table, I think that that's where you start to get some of those things that you were talking about earlier. Like, can these government officials come forward and talk about this kind of stuff? Like right now, they have no incentive to do that. And again, with my mission of validating the true witnesses, like there's no reason to stop or to pull punches. Like, in addition to all my outdoor awesomeness, I spent 30 years, as a businessman and doing, international global projects. I know how to speak a financial language to people and make it worth their while, or give them incentives to do things. And so for me, like, this is kind of what my mission in life is right now, but I can't do it alone. And I need help from people who are wiser than me, who've been doing this longer, who have, fallen into all the pits and climbed their way out and can help the whole community. But anyway, I'm super excited about it.
I love it. Yeah. And you're definitely talking to the right community. I'm sure there'll be many people that will reach out to you with ideas, and I'll have all the links and everything that people want to check out in the description and show notes of this episode. But, James Szubski, it has been just a privilege to talk to you tonight. And thank you for sharing your heart and for what you've been figuring out about the gorge and the mysteries of the gorge. And it'll be very cool to see where this goes next.
Yeah. Again, thank you for lending your platform to me to be able to talk about this kind of stuff and communicate with the people who care passionately about it. So thank you.
Just want to take a few minutes to say thank you to you, all my listeners, for listening to the podcast. Please take a minute to help out the show by subscribing on YouTube, making sure you hit the bell so you don't miss any notifications, and share the episode on YouTube with a friend. Also, if you're listening to us on a podcast, thank you so much. Make sure that you're subscribed, share the show with a friend. Really, it's all about sharing the show wherever you can. If you've had a Bigfoot encounter related to the following or know someone who has, please reach out to me at bigfootsociety@gmail.com or pass on my email. Here's a list: the Subtle Lake area of Oregon, Rainbow, Oregon, McKinsey Bridge area, Sweet Home, pretty much that entire area, the north part, if you get what I mean. I'll see you back next time, listeners. Sasquatch Summerfest this year, July 11th through the 12th. It's going to be fantastic. July 11th through 12th in Green Waters Park in Oak Ridge, Oregon. And listeners, if you're going to go, you can get a 2-day ticket for the cost of one if you use the code BFS, like Bigfoot Society, but BFS, and it'll get you some off your cost. Priscilla was nice enough to provide that for my listeners. So there you go. I look forward to seeing you there. So make sure you head over to www.sasquatchsummerfest.com and pick up your tickets today.